This morning, I'm one-on-one with former City Council Speaker Melissa Mark-Viverito. She's now looking for a seat in Congress, how to replace retiring Bronx Congressman Jose Serrano. Plus,
and the idea is to get it right so that the viewers can decide for themselves.
Greta Van Susteren, named one of the most powerful women in the world, is coming to Pix 11. She and I talked about the political issues this week in Washington.
Now, from 42nd and 2nd, this is Pix 11 News Close-Up with Marvin Scott.
Good morning. While many are focusing their political attention on a presidential election still more than a year away, I have to remind you there are local races that will be decided as well next year. One of them is in the Bronx, where longtime Congressman Jose Serrano is calling it quits after some 30 years. Half a dozen candidates already campaigning for his seat, including former City Council Speaker Melissa Mark-Viverito. She hopes to be the first woman to occupy the 15th Congressional District, and she's campaigning for the same kind of progressive reform she achieved during her 4 years in the City Council. And just recently, she was the interim president of Latino Victory. That's a fund which seeks the election of Latino candidates. Good to have you back on the program.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
All right. First, I've got to begin with your five opponents, who are, the backlash you're getting is to say you're running in a district and you don't even live there. You don't even live in the Bronx. You live in Harlem.
So proud to have represented parts of the 15th Congressional District for 12 years. My mother and family, born and raised in the Bronx. I have deep connections to this district, right? And proud also that in the work as City Council Speaker, which is a position of citywide influence, able to implement policies that benefit the residents of the Bronx. So my record is strong, my trajectory is clear, my connection to this district is very clear, and the accomplishments are. So I'm going to run on that record. I'm going to run about what is the vision that I will have as a Congresswoman for the 15th Congressional District. What is the kind of services that I'll provide, that I'll be an accessible and very much present congressional representative, and that I have a vision of larger scale policies that we need to change at the federal level that will have a direct impact on the lives of Bronxites. So I'm really excited about this race. I'm very excited to make that case to the residents of this district and to be elected as the next Congresswoman.
Now, legally, don't you have to live in the district you represent?
No, you don't. You have to live in the state that you are running in. I'm literally one subway stop away, and at some point, as I've indicated, I will be moving into the district. In the meantime, it is about what kind of leader and representative will you be, and what kind of impact will you bring to the residents that you're seeking to represent.
Now, why are you running? You did a great job in City Council for those 4 years. Now you're running, and I understand that your decision to run really was crystallized by the scandal in Puerto Rico and the resignation of the governor.
Yeah, we're in a crisis in our democracy right now. You know, we have an administration that is flouting the laws left and right, that has people of color and Latino communities deeply in their bullseye, ripping families apart, having policies that are impacting the quality of life of those that live in this country. So what happened was in Puerto Rico, as we all know, people were very dissatisfied because of the corruption and deep scale corruption that was happening in Puerto Rico. People literally took it to the streets, where you had, out of 3 million people, 1 million people saying this government doesn't represent us. We are rejecting it outright. We need change. And they were able to force the governor to resign, and now to have a real deep look into what changes do we want to implement. I see that very much as a motivating moment, an inspirational moment, where people are saying that we can change the route and the future of the island. I think it's the same kind of conversation we need to be having here with regards to this administration and how we're going to change and make sure that we make change happen. And it starts locally. And so that is one of the motivating factors. I think that we
Now, your name surfaced in that scandal for some disparaging remarks the governor made about you.
Exactly, because he and I are not aligned in terms of our political vision. And so he saw me as a threat. And in those chats that were exposed, they used very disparaging words, but also they looked to really attack me and to discredit me because they saw me, again, and what I represented, as a threat to what they were trying to implement in their agenda.
How are you distinguishing yourself from the other 5 other candidates? What are you offering that they're not?
So again, what I'm offering is my record of success. It's not just about believing in certain things, it's about success. So when we talk about the fight for public housing, right, which this district has a large percentage of, and fighting to improve the quality of life of public housing residents, that is something that I have an incredible track record on. When we talk about, and some of the vision that I'm laying out, really fighting that we, at the federal level, we should not have a minimum wage that is less than $15 an hour. That when we talk about health care, we should be and aspiring to a Medicare for all system where we basically are cutting out deductibles and premiums, and that everyone has access to quality health care, and that has a single provider, obviously. So those are things that I will advocate for. And again, when I look at my track record on criminal justice reform, the discussion of closing down Rikers Island, when people were being pragmatic about issues, I was being forward-thinking, right, and visionary in terms of really thinking about where do we need to go as a city. When we talk about the implementation of a legal fund for people that are facing deportation proceedings, that is something we advocated 5-6 years ago, and we got a lot of pushback. Look where we are right now in this country and how much that Legal Defense Fund has been a lifeline for New Yorkers and for families where their loved ones are literally being ripped apart from them, right? When we think about these kind of creative thoughts and ways of looking at public policy as a way of impacting people's lives, that's what I'm going to bring to this race.
You're running on a progressive agenda, and if I've read the background correctly, you seem to be tearing a page out of the successful campaign of Alexandria Cortez, who ran last year and defeated Joe Crowley. Is that the model of your campaign?
I'm sticking to who I am, right, and my values, and my mission and my goals. And I have always been a progressive. Again, as I mentioned, when people were being pragmatic, I was being really progressive and thinking ahead. So I'm sticking to my values, right? I'm not taking corporate PAC money. I'm not taking real estate money.
Why not?
In the city, because there has to be, you cannot have any outside influence, right, or any sort of appearance where people will, those that you're seeking to represent, are going to have any doubt about where your loyalty is and where it is that the work that you're going to be building is going to be focused on. So my campaign, as my governance has been in the past, is going to be very much driven, and at the center is going to be those who I seek to represent. The constituents that I'm looking to represent are going to be at the center of how I develop my work and what it is that I'm going to be focused on. So that's important.
Let's take a break. There are many more issues to talk about. We'll pick up on that right after the break. We continue with Melissa Mark-Viverito running for Congress. We'll be right back. Back now with former City Council Speaker Melissa Mark-Viverito, early candidate next year to replace Jose Serrano, who's retiring in the 15th Congressional District. Let me ask you, do you think your campaign will be hurt because of your close ties during your time in council to Mayor de Blasio?
Not at all. I've always been true to who I am. I'm an independent person. I'm an independent thinker. Obviously, as the leader of a legislative body, you have to bring your colleagues and develop an agenda and be able to move it forward. And that talked about, and that had to be done in partnership with the administration and with the mayor. So there were many times where I did have my differences with the mayor, and that there were issues that he did not want to embrace and push forward. And I was able to move up an agenda of equity and justice, which is at the center of everything I believe in. That we need to create a society that is more equal and more just. That the systems that we have in place breed, unfortunately, that inequity. And how do we right-size government? How do we make government work for the people, right? It's rigged. We all know that. And so being a congressional representative, it is about where do we want to have this country head in? What direction? How am I able to impact policies so that more equity and justice is brought to the constituents of the 15th Congressional District?
I have to ask you this. Do you think New York is in better shape now than it was 6 years ago under Mayor Bloomberg?
Look, I believe in terms of vision and policies of where we are, yes. More the idea that's been brought forth by the mayor, and I will take credit also with regards to work that we did under my leadership in the council, is about bringing more progressive policies to a city that will bring more equity and justice. So when we talk about our criminal justice system and we talk about closing Rikers Island, that is clearly something that I'm proud of, right? When we talk about the inhumanity that exists in our criminal justice system and how we incarcerate people, why are people being incarcerated? Why are they being held in Rikers to begin with? Why? they're maybe too poor. They can't pay bail, right? We have to change that. When we talk about people being in jail, why? Because maybe they got picked up for a low-level nonviolent offense. We implemented the Criminal Justice Reform Act to say that those low-level nonviolent offenses, you shouldn't get an arrest record for it. You should be able to get a fine and walk away at the end of the day. We have implemented policies to create more equity and justice in the city of New York. The work that I talked about with regards to immigration, that's part of it as well. So that to me is a different vision, yes, than where Bloomberg was at. And I think that definitely implementation has had its challenges under this administration.
Now, I think a lot of people are in agreement with you that Rikers should be closed, but they're not in agreement with the mayor's proposal that we have smaller jails in 4 of our 5 boroughs.
I believe we do. When we think about, there are people, 15 to 20% of the people at Rikers are fulfilling terms of a year or less. So there is a level of incarceration that is needed, right? So people, you want people closer to their home networks, right? To their family networks, to their neighborhood networks. If we're going to have people successfully reintegrate into our society, then we need to maintain those connections, one, and to think of other initiatives and rehabilitative processes that will allow people to integrate successfully back into our communities. And so we have to re-envision what criminal justice looks like and implement these reforms, and I'm proud of the work that I've done in that area.
I have to ask you this. Where do you weigh in on Mayor de Blasio, his effort to running for president?
I don't agree with it.
Should he step aside?
I think he should. And I think what he needs to be focused on right now is the task at hand, which is to govern and lead the city of New York. That is what we voted him to do, and that is where I think his focus needs to be. And I think that this attempt and this distraction of running for president is not healthy and it's not fair to New Yorkers. And so I believe that, yes, he should step aside and focus at the job at hand.
And as we see, there are these posters people are putting up missing. Posters going up all over the city for the mayor. Let me ask you this. There was something that you were very instrumental in called the Nonprofit Community Land Trust. What is that, and how would that impact, if you're in Congress, the people in the 15th congressional district, one of the poorest districts in the nation,
right,
where the mean income is like $28,000 a year?
So this came from advocates. Advocates, while I was speaker in my district, approached me and said that they wanted to develop a land trust locally, right? The way we needed to do it was to get authorization from the city housing department in order to implement it, and that city properties would be placed in this land trust, which was managed locally by residents. That is a very empowering model when we think of the inequity economically that we have in the system, that if you're allowing people, residents, to hold property where they can then manage and control equity and assets and make sure that they're deciding their future economically, building affordable housing, right? Leveraging the equity in that property to build more affordable housing. There's a lot of different ways that you can look at the land trust, but the city pushed hard against it. I was able to maneuver, thanks to the advocacy, with the advocates that pushed this. We got the approval. Now, because of that effort at that local level, we now see a land trust in the 15th congressional district. Potentially, there's, I think, maybe 2. We see also land trusts in other parts of the city. That's now it's becoming a more citywide model. I think we need to scale this up. I think there should be support at the federal level to really scale up this idea and concept of community land trust, because that is true, and it will generate true economic and community empowerment.
The whole city, of course, is so controversial. The firing of police officer Daniel Pantaleo, do you feel it was justice served, or was this a political decision just to keep everything calm in the city?
I mean, I agree with the advocates that that's not, first of all, it took way too long. This should have been decided a long time ago. And that family has suffered enough, the Garner family. And I believe and I support what the advocates are saying, that it's not just about that officer. It also, you have to look at the other officers that were involved, and the fact that there is no justice being done in that case is a travesty.
It's impacting the police, because the mayor has not been that supportive of police. There's now a police slowdown. This is really having an impact in the city, isn't it?
I don't know if the slowdown is real. Obviously, we all know the leader of the PBA is a lot of bluster, and unfortunately is a great cause of division in this city. I don't think he does a service. I think the commissioner is attempting to, maneuver a situation that is difficult. But, I believe that community demands for more police accountability and reform is critically important. We have to continue that path.
Okay, we're out of time.
Thank you
We
so
have a
much.
whole year to hear more campaign issues. We'll hear your opponents will be on this program as well, and we'll surely have you back before next year's primary and racing for the 15th congressional district seat. Melissa
Gracias. Thank you for the
Mark-Viverito.
opportunity.
Thank you. And we're going to take a break and come back. We'll hear from Greta Van Susteren. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This portion of our program was recorded this past week in Washington, where I came here to greet the newest member of the Pix 11 family.
And I am thrilled to be here with you.
Greta Van Susteren is joining us. We'll be starting next Sunday. We'll be sharing an hour of political and issue news.
I get to follow you. That's
Yeah.
tough, though. That's a tough act to follow. That's a tough act to follow.
Greta, I am so delighted that you're joining us. We will be doing Pix 11 News Close-Up 6:30 to 7, and for you other early risers, 7 o'clock for you with full court press.
That's great. It's fun, isn't it?
Well, you know something, it's just been terrific, and you know something, we are communicators, and this is quite a year to do our communicating.
Yeah, and you and I just met, but it's really fun. It feels very natural. I love you. You're fun.
I wish we weren't so far apart between Washington and New York.
Well, we can maybe sometime we could fix that.
Yeah,
I'll come
we'll
up on the
work,
set.
Via satellite. Anyway,
Indeed.
I know you have a goal for this program. You want to deal with all the issues, and there are so many issues in this election year that we have to talk about. Where would you put at the top of the list of the issues that the voters are concerned about?
Well, you know, there, as you note, there are so many of them. Obviously, money is the big one, and then money has a lot of subcategories. But if you take one like, let's take one that would impacts my hometown of Appleton, Wisconsin, and New York City, and every place in between, and north and south of that, student loans. I mean, how is it that in this day and age, you can't send your kid to school, or you can't go to college, except you take out these exorbitant student loans, then you can't get the jobs to pay it, then your family's drowning in debt, and even if you aren't a student, or you don't have a family member who is a student, suppose you want to rent an apartment to some young person, he can't even pass the credit check because of these student loans. So there's got to be a better way, and this is a crisis, and I'd like to talk about that, among other things.
As we walked in front of the Capitol, just a few blocks from her studio, Greta and I continued to talk about the issues on the minds of voters in next year's presidential race. People vote on the issues. They vote on the pocketbook issues and what's going to make their lives better.
Yeah.
So
Everyone always says the economy, and I think that's probably true unless something catastrophic happens to put us all in fear, like 9/11. But I think for the most part, people want to be able to raise their families, put food on the table, educate their children, or take a little trip, or have good jobs, have some self-worth. And so the economy is always the big issue.
once named the 94th most powerful woman in the world by Forbes magazine, Greta told me her new program will be unbiased and fair.
I like facts, and you know, whatever the facts are. I mean, I can't. You know, the facts are what they are. I like to educate people, saying, "Here you go. Here are the facts. Do with them what you think right. You know, whatever you think is your business." I don't tell viewers how to think. I sometimes tell them what I think, but I don't tell them how to think. They're smart. They don't need me to tell them.
In the aftermath of the two recent mass shootings in El Paso and Dayton, and renewed calls for stronger gun control laws, I asked Greta if she thought Congress would take any action before next year's election.
I don't know if it will, Marvin, and I'm all in favor of background checks. I don't want people to have a gun who shouldn't have one, but I'm an old criminal defense lawyer, and in the 1980s, Washington, D.C. had some of the toughest gun control laws, but my clients, I was a defense attorney, had no problem getting guns. There are about 350 million guns in this country, so people who think that gun control is going to stop all these killings, you know, I think they're misleading themselves. I think it may be an important part of it, but there are a lot of elements to it. It's much more than gun control. The thing that bothers me most about the gun control argument is that right after something happens, everyone says, you know, either gun control or guns rights, because money comes in over the transom to the special interest groups because they love it. And then what happens 5 days later? What shooting? People forgot. I mean, who's talking right now about El Paso? Who's talking about Dayton? Nobody. Everybody forgets it. And that's horrible. That's terrible for all the people who are victims and their families, and for the next victims.
But no one talks about enough about the NRA and how they support so many of these campaigns.
But it's not enough just to talk about. What are you going to do about it? And that's the missing element. And I hope to get candidates on to talk about what are you actually going to do that's practical.
What role do you think gun control will play in next year's election?
Well, it depends on if we have another horrible shooting close up to the election. It'll have a great impact because it will be what people vote for. I think right now we're about 14 months or so out from the election. I think people are not paying as much attention to the election as they will be come November of next year, rather. They'll be paying. So whatever issue is percolating to the top will be the primary issue. But that doesn't mean the issues aren't important now, and it doesn't mean a lot of people are paying attention now. And we are at that point where, at least in the Democratic Party, is that they are weeding out some of the people who are not performing as well with the voters in the polls. Although the polls are misleading too. The polls that we're reading about are all national polls, and when you factor in large states like California and New York, that can skew a poll since we have an electoral college and it's the swing states that make all the difference.
If you look into your crystal ball, Greta, who do you see as emerging as the nominees of the Democratic Party?
It's impossible to know. It's absolutely impossible to know. Okay. But I will say this. I don't think Vice President Biden, who is a very nice man, I don't think he's going to be the Democratic candidate. His biggest weakness is if he goes out there and he says, I'm going to do X for you, the first thing the Republicans are going to say to you, well, why didn't you do that for the 34 years you were U.S. Senate and the 8 years you were Vice President? I mean, he's very vulnerable by the fact that he's been in office so long and has had so much opportunity to do all the things that he might be promising now. So he's very vulnerable. I don't think the Democrats will nominate him for that reason. There's some. I have no idea who's going to get chosen. In fact, there could be somebody else who could join the race. I mean, there may be. Who knows? We have a
dark horse out there.
Yeah, nobody. Somebody else could join the race. I also think some of the ones who don't make this next debate. They may do particularly well. It's usually the ones who are different from the rest who sort of, who shine because they don't have to divide up the vote with all the other ones. If they all have the same policy, then they're all dividing up the same vote. But you take someone like Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, a Democrat. She's quite different than the other Democrats, so she's not competing. She may get an unusual group of Democratic voters, so she may suddenly begin to appear much better in the polls. But it's all guessing.
How about Elizabeth Warren? She seems to be coming up in the polls.
Elizabeth Warren is moving up in the polls. And she's hitting on some of the things that people care about, which is the corporate stuff. A lot of people aren't wild about Wall Street, your hometown, but rest of America thinks that there's a lot of.
And what happens if we get into this? We've been hearing fears of a recession. The president says it's not going to happen, but with the trade wars going on right now with China. What's your guess?
Well, that's where the 14 months makes such a difference. If you and I are having this conversation a year from now, I can give you a much better answer. But if we are not in a recession, let's say 14 months, let's say a year from now we're not in a recession, and instead that the economy is really sizzling and cooking, we know what President Trump is going to say. See, that's what they were all saying a year ago. Fake news, or he's going to tweet about it, or whatever. So it depends where we are a year from now. The economy. I mean, it makes a big difference.
All right, let's talk for a moment about you and me.
Okay.
We're gonna be sharing Sunday mornings.
That's
early.
right, the two of us.
Tell me what's the format of your program for Court Press?
Here's the thing: is I went out and looked at the landscape, in the last couple of years, and I thought, how come every time I read an article, it says that the most trusted news is the local news? And I think, okay, that people are getting dissatisfied with the cables. They're getting dissatisfied with the national networks. There's a lot of a lot of scandals and crisis and everything. And I thought to myself, okay, who should I hook my horse to? Which cart? I thought, I want to be at local news. They're the ones that have the credibility. Then I started studying local news. It's very fact-oriented. It's not a lot of opinion or tweeting or insults. It's very fact-oriented. Then I thought, the voters, viewers, they want to hear from the local news. So I thought, okay, maybe some of the attributes they have can rub off on me. I'd love to learn from the local news. I want to be part of it. I'm from Wisconsin. And then I look at the issues, and every issue that I want to talk about, I don't care if it's student loans or the economy, it affects everybody. And I don't want to do a show where you got one politician saying this one's a jerk and this one's saying no, you're a jerk, and going back and forth. What I want to talk to the people. I want to go out across the country, find out the real problems that are facing American people, and I want to bring them back to newsmakers on Capitol Hill and have them say, here's the problem. What are you going to do about it? I know you hate the other guy or the other opponent, but what are you actually going to do about this particular problem for this particular segment of the society? There's so many issues out there that I want to talk about with people who live and breathe these issues and problems every day, and I bet they have some really good solutions, probably better than some politicians.
Well, we'll be listening to those issues starting next Sunday, September 8th, right here on
Right
Pix
after
11.
you, right after you,
Well,
right after you.
Join me for Pix 11 News Close-Up, 6:30. Get your second cup of coffee at 7 a.m. for Greta and Full Court Press.
Thank you, Marvin. Thank you for coming down. Thank you.
Thanks so much, and good luck with your new syndicated
Thank you.
program.
I hope I have luck. Thank you.
And let me say, that'll do it for our program for this week. If you want to see any of this program again or have any comments, log on to our website at pix11.com/11newscloseup. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everyone.